Xtalks is the industry leader in connecting life science, food, healthcare, and medical device professionals. The Xtalks Life Science podcast features insightful conversations with industry experts about all things pharma, biotech, and more.
Hello and welcome to the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. I'm Ayesha Rashid, Senior Life Science Journalist at Xtalks.com. And this week I am delighted to introduce a very special guest on our show. We have with us Paul Romness, who is the Chair and CEO of OS Therapies, which is a company developing novel immunotherapies for cancers like osteosarcoma as well as other solid tumors. Paul has over 25 years of experience in the biopharmaceutical industry, having served in various functions within major companies like Johnson & Johnson, Amgen, and Boehringer Ingelheim. Paul has been directly involved in the launch of 9 major products in the industry, covering indications from oncology to surgery, HIV, COPD, and diabetes, among others. Throughout his professional career and within his community, Paul has focused on and advocated for unmet medical needs and getting treatments to patients. Paul has a Bachelor of Science in Finance from American University, as well as a Master's of Health Policy from George Washington University Medical Center. To learn more about the current landscape of immunotherapeutics, including the work, of course, that Paul is leading at OS Therapies, let's turn to him now. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Ayesha, for having me.
So I'd like to start off by asking you a bit about your journey in the biopharmaceutical industry spanning over 2 decades and how that journey has been. You've been at some very big, high-profile pharma companies, and so what were those experiences like, and how did those experiences ultimately translate into what you're heading at OS Therapies, and what led you to take on the work at OS?
Sure. I had the opportunity to run into a few folks this week at an investor conference that I hadn't seen in a long time. And we talked about some of the experiences we had over the last 25 years, 30 years working for Johnson & Johnson and Amgen and some of these places. And, you know, it all built to an opportunity when a situation arose where my daughter's best friend was diagnosed with a very rare and very deadly bone cancer, osteosarcoma. And a few of us had previously tried to start a company by taking some products from big pharma off the shelf that were too small for them to develop. And so when Olivia got sick, I kind of knew what we needed to do. There hadn't been any new treatments in osteosarcoma in over 40 years. There is no real treatment for dogs, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, out on the market. And so, when she got sick, and I always tell the end of the story, she's doing great. She's just gotten accepted to UCLA and University of California, San Francisco medical schools. And so she'll be going to med school next fall. And I wouldn't be surprised if she goes into pediatric oncology. She's on our board of directors. But through the travels through this disease, ended up meeting a lot of parents who've lost their children. And the problem isn't as much when the child is first diagnosed, although that's horrible. A lot of times the child will lose a limb or get some big honking implants in their leg or their shoulder to replace the joint that's been affected by cancer. And then they get what's considered the worst round of chemo and cancer. It's 9 months of 3 very toxic drugs, cisplatin, doxorubicin, and methotrexate. And 10% of the kids pass away from just that. But that's not where cancer, and that's not where osteosarcoma is the most deadly. The most deadly part of cancer is when it metastasizes. And in osteosarcoma and a lot of other solid tumors, it metastasizes to the lungs. And then the brain. And that's because those little micrometastases are looking for oxygen soft tissue. And unfortunately, as those metastases start to multiply in the lungs and the brain, they start to limit the function of those very obviously critical organs. And so a lot of about 50% of the kids in osteosarcoma end up suffocating because their lungs just can't keep up. So we knew we needed to do something about that, and so that's when we found this technology that was developed out of Penn, and we started the company and licensed it and did a clinical trial that we just finished, and we're going to take the results to the FDA this year.
That is wonderful. I mean, thank you so much, Paul, first of all, for sharing that very personal story and for really giving us that background, that context, that very personal perspective to what led you to the work that you're doing. So thank you so much for that. And indeed, it's a very devastating cancer, a pediatric cancer, and definitely amazing endeavors and work that you're leading, like I said, in a very high unmet need space. So that's really wonderful to learn about. And so in terms of the company OS Therapies, what is it? What is the core mission and focus, so to say? It's kind of a cliched question, but in terms of immunotherapies, it's such a vast space now. It's come a long way. And so what kind of differentiates OS from others in the area?
Well, we have a very different business model. We thought we were absolutely unique until we run into Day One Bio. Like them, we are public. Their trading is DAWN, we're OSTX. And they were running parallel to us. They're a little advanced ahead of us, but they started, as did we, with a rare pediatric cancer. And then they added an ADC technology in the background, another platform technology. And then they got approval from the FDA for their rare pediatric cancer. They sold their priority review voucher. That helps them pay for the other technology as well as the rare and pediatric cancer commercialization. And we're doing exactly the same. We just happen to be probably about a year behind them. They received approval and then their PRV in November of last year. We hope to get ours by the end of this year. So it is a unique approach. Obviously, we're doing a different cancer than they are. We're actually have a very different ADC technology. They're also worth about $1.4 billion, and we're only worth about at our highest so far about 120 million. So kind of a 10x on us. And what we thought was very contrarian actually is a very proven and creative contrarian approach to drug development. The other thing that really stands out for us is our lead product, OST HER2, which is a Listeria monocytogenes, and we take a attenuated Listeria, which is a nasty biologic infection. We weaken it and we fuse a HER2 vector to it. We give it to the body, and the body reacts very violently from an immune response standpoint. We shut that down at hour 4 with an antibiotic, but the immune response still just takes off and tells the body to start secreting T cells that go out and try and find those little micrometastases we were talking about earlier. And so we have the only Listeria-based immune system in the world, and it's what we call an off-the-shelf immunotherapy. There are a lot of therapies that have gotten very complicated. The CAR Ts, where they're taking your T cells and taking them out of your body and reconstituting them and giving them back to you. What we're doing is just firing up the body's innate immune system. And it's amazing the immune response that the body gets from Listeria. And in our clinical results that we announced on January 15th of this year, it showed that about a third of those patients were responding. And these were very late stage patients that were responding. And we're comparing that to a historic comparator that is much worse than that. So we think we've got about a 3x improvement in overall survival and disease progression. We'll see what the overall survival comes out at, but our event-free survival is very good so far. It's not a home run. as our most, you know, most advances, certainly in our space, are incremental advances, and this would be a significant incremental advance in osteosarcoma. But then we want to pivot to solid tumors with the exact same other solid tumors. And then what's very different about our product and our technology is it was actually approved for companion animals, for canines, for dogs, before it was for humans. And most companion drugs for companion animals go from humans to the companion animal. In this case, it was the dogs that was approved first. And that's important because osteosarcoma is the number one disease killer of dogs, number two killer of dogs in the United States after automobiles. And a lot more dogs get it in the United States than kids. There are only about 1,000 kids a year in the United States, 20,000 globally that get osteosarcoma. 30 to 40,000 dogs a year get osteosarcoma in the United States, and there's nothing on the market for it right now.
I love that approach where really you're crossing species essentially, and you're taking a product that has been shown to have efficacy in canines and dogs, and now you're able to translate that to humans. And I love that in terms of having a proof of concept almost, but a high level proof of concept that transcends in vivo, mouse models or things like that. So,
well, if you really like it, Ayesha, the trailer's out. There's a full length movie coming out on May 1st on PBS that highlights not only our patients, our four-legged patients, it highlights at least one or two of our two-legged patients, and also highlights Dr. Nicola Mason, one of the researchers at University of Pennsylvania who developed our product. And it's all about comparative medicine.
Comparative medicine.
Shelter Me.
Yes. Shelter Me. Okay. Wonderful. On PBS.
Cancer Pioneers. And the trailer's out there. We'll make sure you get it and you can share it with your viewers, listeners. But it's really cool.
That's amazing. I'm so excited to see that. So that's May 1st on PBS.
Yeah.
Shelter Me. Scientists.
Cancer
Pioneers. That sounds very, very cool. And I'm definitely looking forward to that. And that's amazing. We'll definitely have the link to that on the webpage with the podcast, and put that out for our viewers, our listeners as well. So yeah, that's amazing. Again, like you said, Paul, I think science in general is incremental. And of course, this space in particular, I think a lot of things that, let's say we grew, for me, I can remember in high school biology or even in undergrad learning about, from immunotherapy to gene therapies, and then to see that evolve into actual clinical practice or clinical application. It's been really, really amazing to see that. So.
And we have to remind ourselves, I mean, I said that 33% of the patients responded. That was both males and females. 47% of our patients that were female responded. And we often forget that Keytruda was approved originally with only 50% response rates. So great opportunity here. And I think, there are other cool facts about the data that we announced. The other one is, these were patients that already had metastasized to the lungs and had them removed. And typically, these patients, the more resections they have, the faster they come and the more they come to the lungs. So it just ends up being like spreading like mold or mushrooms, right? The interesting thing about the results, the initial top line results of our trial, was the further along the pathway, the better these patients responded, which is very atypical of most therapies with most diseases. So the kids that had only one resection did not do as well as the kids that had more than one resection. And the young lady that is in the movie, Serena Subata, had 7 surgeries removing lung mets from her, and she's still cancer-free at almost 3 years now.
Wow, you don't hear about that very often whatsoever, because difficult to treat cancers that have metastasized, that are aggressive, limited options, and even the therapies. Those patients are often also very vulnerable and very weakened. And so even in clinical trials, it's often difficult to even have that kind of a subset of patients, and much less to have a therapy that actually works optimally and works better in that kind of a subset than compared to.
And wait till you see her in this movie, because Serena has not weakened at all.
Okay,
strong as
these are all the misconceptions and perceptions. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, she shows she is such a fighter. And she and Dr. Nicola Mason and I were all at the same conference about 7 years ago, although unknowingly did we know Serena at the time, which is the exact same conference where we'll be sharing the rest of our data at the end of June. And that should be just before we go to the FDA with that data.
Okay. What conference is that, if I may ask?
It's called MIB Factor, Make It Better Factor, in Salt Lake City last weekend in June, just before the July 4th week. And it's because the community, osteosarcoma community, is so small, it's probably one of the most impactful disease meetings I've ever been to, because you have patients, their parents, researchers, advocates, all in the same room.
In the same room,
and it's really impressive.
Indeed. I think we are seeing a lot more of that, especially in rare diseases, like you mentioned, because the patient communities are so small. And so they're very tight knit, and so it's probably easier to connect with them, and for them to connect with researchers and like yourself and other stakeholders. So that's really, really wonderful. And we're seeing a lot of that research is driven by patients or caregivers or experiences, and so and you've outlined several people and already, which is so wonderful to hear about. And so that's definitely keeping the patient at the center and patient centricity. We always talk about that, but it's kind of, sometimes it's like, is that just a buzzword, or what's that really mean? Right. And so I can definitely, hear and I can definitely see that that's a core tenet of what of the work that you're leading. So that's really, really awesome to hear. And in terms of the indications, so in terms of this approach, can it be, are you also looking at it in other indications outside of osteosarcoma?
Yeah, so we have done some very small preliminary trials, one with about 10 breast cancer patients. If you think of any solid tumor, it sets up like osteosarcoma, except osteosarcoma is considered one of the hardest. Obviously, pancreatic cancer is another really tough one, colorectal cancer, esophageal cancer. But even today, there are some 40,000 people a year dying of breast cancer, even though we hear about some of the advances. And look, Herceptin or trastuzumab works really well. It keeps the cancer down, but it doesn't kill it. And so one of the trials we had 10 breast cancer patients in it. Another trial we had with Herceptin and our therapy the Herceptin kept the cancer down, but it wasn't killing it. And so eventually the pressure gets too great and your body starts to work around the Herceptin. What we're doing is sending in our therapy to kill the cancer, because we've fired up the immune system to go find those little micrometastases. So if it works in osteosarcoma, which it looks like from our clinical trial it does, get FDA approval by the end of this year, we pivot to other solid tumors, particularly breast cancer, with standard of care. It's a lot easier to add something to standard of care than to try and do something other than standard of care.
Like as a monotherapy, is it harder to?
So we would add it with Herceptin or trastuzumab and see if the Herceptin would work better and work longer. And so that would be a post-market phase 3 trial.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. And so is there scope for this therapy to be a monotherapy, or is the idea to pair it with existing therapies and to complement them or to enhance them in some way?
Again, standard of care is very challenging. For osteosarcoma, for instance, the standard of care has not
Right.
changed in
Yeah.
40 years.
Yeah.
And so even to this day, they will do 2 months of chemo before they resect the cancer, because back in the day, they'd have to order some implants, some custom implants, if they were doing some limb sparing for the leg. Those limb sparing implants are now modular. There's no need to wait or order them, but people still do 2 months of chemo before they do the resection. You know, does that make sense? I don't know. It's just the way we've always done it, right? So I see, if we could get rid of chemo in even this one small little cancer, man, that would
Yeah, it
be
would be game
that'd
changing.
be
Yeah, as
life
they
check
say.
for me, right?
Yeah.
But then we talk about our other platform technology, our ADC technology, and I don't know if you were going to go there or not, Ayesha, but the cool thing about that is our ADC technology, we're wrapping our payload with silicone dioxide. And so it's like bubble wrapping either chemo or monoclonal antibodies or mRNA, connecting it to the ADC with that silicone dioxide, and then delivering it into the cancer environment. That cancer environment has a lower pH level, higher acidity. We can dial in exactly what pH level that coating around our payload and that linker uh, erodes, right? It's eaten up by the acidity,
Right.
drops the payload into the cancer environment, and then that, let's say it's a chemo, makes the chemo active at that point instead of going through the body damaging
Right. Systemically.
healthy
Yeah.
tissue. So we think that our ADC will be able to deliver not only safer, but multiple payloads, 3, 6, 9 payloads, possibly different payloads into the cancer environment in a much safer and much more efficacious way.
Yeah. Much more targeted in that way for sure.
Correct.
Yeah, indeed. And so in terms of drug development in this space, as you mentioned, allogeneic based CAR T cells or immunotherapies are more challenging in terms of having to harvest cells from patients and then modify them and then inject them back. And so there are, those are obvious challenges. But in general, from a drug development perspective, what are some of the challenges in developing immunotherapies versus, let's say, a small molecule drug? The obvious, of course, these are biologics and more complex, but from a regulatory standpoint and just in terms of the whole clinical trials through to commercialization and that whole pathway, what does that look like today? Have things gotten better with different regulatory pathways as more and more immunotherapies do come to market?
So it is a very volatile time in the regulatory world, not just the markets.
Yeah.
There are a lot of changes going on at the FDA.
Yes.
What we take comfort in at the FDA is the new commissioner believes that if your products are safe and they show some efficacy, they should get on the market. Our drug seems to be very safe. No serious adverse events. Slight chills and fever, which means your immune system's getting fired up, but that's about it. The interim head of the CBER, the Center for Biologic Evaluation and Review, is a comparative medicine or translational medicine expert. So we hope that we will get a very good reception there with our, part-time canine, part-time human product. And the FDA approved 60 orphan drugs last year on single phase 1 or phase 2, single arm phase 1 or phase 2 trials. We're a single arm phase 2 trial, good side effects, really good side effects. And it looks like it seems to have some responses in about a third of the patients. So we feel very good about the FDA. We're obviously going to the EMA in Europe and the UK and other parts of the world for marketing access. And, drug development is hard, right? So we've had phase 1 and phase 3 trials in canines for this technology. We've had phase 1 and phase 2 trials in humans. We expect to go to the FDA shortly, the next few weeks, next couple months, and should know by the end of the year. We obviously have expedited review. We have rare and pediatric disease designation. We have orphan and fast track designation. And, we get a 5-month review. If we get approved, we get the priority review voucher that we can sell to big pharma so that they can cut in line at the FDA, which is, it's a government sponsored, global access or clear, right? But for the FDA. And we really believe that legislation should be reauthorized. We thought it would be reauthorized the first quarter of this year. Obviously, as a company, our priority review voucher continues to gain more and more value the longer Congress ponders the idea of reauthorizing. Ironically, it's returning to my old life in big pharma of dealing with, regulatory bodies and Congress in government affairs and public policy. But, the priority review voucher is a great program. And I hope that this Congress and this administration reauthorize it. But until they do, our potential priority review voucher continues to gain value. The minimum price for them right now is $150 million of non-dilutive funds. So, well, it is. The canine stuff is really cool because
it is, because you don't hear about it very much. Because you usually hear about, in monkeys or primates like chimps, because we're
or
cousins
rodents
and whatnot. But you don't really hear too much about dogs and. Yeah.
Well, the cool thing is dogs and humans osteosarcoma are like 99.9% similar. They present the same.
Wow.
The DNA of the
tumor
disease
cells
is
and
almost identical.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That is so interesting, because I think we are usually so focused on trying to find, or focused on similarities between just normal biology, but I haven't really encountered too much of looking at comparative. Maybe it's out there, but I haven't really come across it a lot. But comparing disease pathobiologies across species, but
that's what this whole movie coming out with PBS is about. But I don't know if you've also seen it was a 2-part series that Anderson Cooper did on 60 Minutes around dogs and kids. And he actually flew out to Orange County to interview our patient number 19 in our trial, Christy Nome, and her mom and her clinician, her physician at Orange County Children's Hospital. And that was a great interview too.
Yeah. 60 Minutes, right? Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. And I think just the fact that these kinds of shows are featuring your work, I think because it really resonates with general audiences. They can make sense of it. It's like, oh, diseases in dogs and in humans might be similar. And even though we, this podcast or our audiences are very scientific, very life sciences, very complex concepts and things like that. But and so you don't hear about a lot of like biotech and high level kind of work being featured on a 60 Minutes or a PBS in this way. At least I haven't seen too much of it, but yeah. That's very cool. Very cool. And in terms of partnerships, I think actually before that, I'd like to actually know, of course, a lot of differences between big pharma and then at a smaller biotech. So that's kind of an obvious thing. Which do you like better? Where are you happier? Or, what are the two different worlds like, and what made you leave big pharma
Yeah,
and
they're
pursue? Yeah.
extremely different.
Yes, I can imagine.
Big pharma and big biotech have a role, right, to handle the big diseases. It's interesting. They're all of a sudden getting interested in rare
Rare diseases.
diseases,
That's right. Yes.
pediatric diseases, and that's great because we're going to need some help reaching the other 19,000 patients around the world. So we're talking to some folks about partnering with them, at least ex-US, if not globally, helping commercialize this for us. If not, we'll do it ourselves. Certainly in the United States, the 20 places where we did our clinical trial are the 20 places where most kids are going to go across the country. They're the major pediatric centers along the East Coast, the West Coast, the South, the North, and in the center of the country. And so we can get to a majority of those patients. But big pharma is, it's like the Titanic. They carry a lot of people, they do a lot of good, but they have a hard time turning and adjusting and making making decisions. We are fast and nimble, and we make decisions quickly. We've done this very inexpensively. We've got enough cash to get us through the end of this year, but we don't have a lot of money because we've done this very efficiently. Most companies would have spent 150 million plus, and frankly, the companies that had both our technologies before us spent over $250 million, and they just couldn't get it over the finish line. We've spent a fraction of that, 1/6 of that, and we've gotten the clinical trial finished. We're lining up the ADC technology. We've put the ADC technology into a sub company. We're looking at some other assets, some clinical ready assets to put into that sub company. And so, really focusing on our 3 lines of business, whether it be human osteosarcoma, canine osteosarcoma, or these ADCs. And then obviously pivoting with the HER2 to other solid tumors. So, we move quickly. We make decisions quickly. We're very cost effective. Those are just things that big pharma and big bio can't be, right? Because 17 people have to sign off on something. And I get it, been there. But, I think it's good for everyone to walk a mile in each other's shoes.
That's true. Yeah.
I will say there's a ton of great science out in the small companies, and over 90% of the pipelines in big pharma and big biotech come from small biotech, small pharma.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Indeed. I mean, as we saw in the development of the COVID-19 vaccines, right? It was Pfizer partnering with smaller BioNTech. And so, yeah, absolutely. A lot of the robust science is happening at the smaller biotechs for sure. And in terms of collaborations, partnerships, you did talk about some of the finances, but how important have those been for OS Therapies, and what kinds of collaborations and partnerships do you have, if you have any major ones right now?
We don't have any that we can announce now as far as collaborations with commercializing both the canine or the human. Obviously, our collaborations with Wall Street and New York Stock Exchange and the banks that helped us go public and raise our PIPE funding. Obviously, I'm really glad we raised that money when we could. As you know, the biotech finance market is horrid right now. I was on a call with 25 other biotech CEOs and a couple weeks ago, small biotech CEOs. And I think I'm just really glad that we did the funding round that we did at the end of the year to get us through this year. Hopefully, it is a cyclical, they call economics abysmal science for a reason, right? It goes down, it comes back up. I think most of us, if not all of us, save maybe one, thought that 2025 was going to be an awesome year. It is just really unpredictable.
Unpredictable, yeah, is the word.
And that's, that's fine for the major indices and, whatever. But for the lay people to come into the biotech investment world, they have to feel comfortable with predictability, and they have to see consistency and consistent growth. And we just haven't had that in 3 years. And so what we need is some predictability and some wins in the biotech space. And I really hope we're going to be one of those that can help us stimulate the biotech industry, because we've got some very, very short-term milestones. The cool thing about OS Therapies is, as I say to a lot of our investors, is it's not your typical 5, 7, 8-year investment biotech. You'll know in the next 6 to 12 months whether it was a good investment. And so we IPO'd last year when no one else was. One, because we needed the money. Two, we really wanted people to see and get exposure for our platform technologies. But I really hope that we would stimulate the IPO market in biotechs, and we did it at New York Stock Exchange. They've been awesome to us. They've given us a lot of exposure there. But I really hope that the current administration backs up their talk around pediatric cancer, supporting pediatric cancer, and we get a big win here by the end of the year, and we get the biotech market going again.
Yeah, I mean, what could be better than that, than to stimulate that market and the innovations that, come with that. So that's important to have indeed. And in terms of, I guess, some, we talk about trends and advancements and things like that. We've come a long way in the field, as we've talked about. But looking forward, what are some of the trends, advancements that you think will be kind of game changing, or that you're excited about, whether technologically or which will translate into greater biological insights, of course. So, what do you think is going to be key to really advancing things to the next level?
But particularly that will influence our company and how our company can influence it. One, I really hope to see that there's kind of a phasing out of the traditional chemotherapies. So ADCs, not just ours, but ADCs, as I said a couple years ago, they will be on TV ads in 8, 10 years from now, Ayesha, like you see on TV ads now, and in the generic ends in the MAB, monoclonal antibody.
Yeah.
I think in 8 to 10 years, ADCs are going to take the place of a lot of drugs, not only the ones that only you see on direct to consumer, but in general, because they're a safer way of delivering drugs and novel drugs that seem to work better when concentrated. I think there's that. I think immunotherapies have to play a bigger role in oncology, because chemo is a very blunt object. Even if we deliver it safely and more efficaciously, there's got to be an immune involvement in fighting cancer. You and I have cancer in us right now. It's the immune system. Everyone has cancer in us. It's undetectable, and it's the immune system that identifies it and kills it before it takes hold in a particular place. So, is the immune system of people that are getting cancer, are there some deficiencies there? Probably. There's the genetic alteration of the cancer.
And how do you assess that, right?
Yeah. And then I think the third thing is, making sure that we pivot to all these other cancers. And there's so much unmet medical need right now, the other cancers. And I think that's the other big difference between big pharma, big biotech, and us and our community of smaller companies, is we're looking at kind of contrarian approaches. And, there are places that we really need some concentration. Colorectal cancer, that I wear this every day. Just sarcomas in general are incredibly aggressive and incredibly deadly, whether they're in the bone or not. Just colorectal cancer, esophageal cancer. And again, back to breast cancer. There's a lot more we should be doing. And so we'll just keep pushing on some of the places where other folks aren't going.
Amazing. And so you talked about some key milestones coming up. You touched on them. What can we expect from OS Therapies this year and in the next couple of years? What should we watch out for?
So, we're putting our data together for the FDA. We're going to meet with the FDA next month. The feedback we get, we'll share. We'll share our data with our comparator data the end of June. We'll take that to the FDA in July, I hope. And then we hope to hear back from the FDA by the end of the year. It will be a rolling admission, accelerated approval. So they can decide at any time they want. We get a priority review voucher with that. We also have potential of bringing in some new technologies around our ADC technologies that will be clinically ready and ready to go into phase 1 trials next year, or phase 2 trials next year even. So a lot of opportunities. It's just really executing, which has been our focus. And so, and then obviously, hopefully the markets turn around and start supporting biotechs like they should. Because, it's these economic downturns that they really inhibit innovation. And so, 2008 through 2012 was a dearth of innovation in the biotech industry. And this potential period could have a real chilling effect on innovation. So hopefully the biotech and the whole investment thesis turns around quickly.
Indeed, and I think that's a great sort of just putting things into perspective. I think that's really key what you mentioned in terms of how the economics are deeply tied to the innovations. So they go hand in hand, and let's hope for the best. And all I can say is that I've had such a wonderful time learning so much from you, Paul, in terms of all the work that you've done so far and that you're leading at OS Therapies, comparative therapeutics. I just really had such a great time learning about all of this, and I'm sure our audiences will also have enjoyed this. And we'll keep our eye out for all of the milestones and great work coming out from OS Therapies and to here at Xtalks. So we will definitely be in touch and remain connected. So Paul, thank you so much once again for your wonderful insights, the wonderful conversation, and I just wish you nothing but the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the nice conversation.
All right, that's the end of this episode of the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. If you liked today's show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you next week. Bye for now.
To join the Xtalks community, visit xtalks.com and register for exclusive access to curated content like live webinars, news articles, and educational videos. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the speakers sharing them and should not be taken as professional advice, nor do they necessarily reflect the policy or position of Honeycomb Worldwide. For further information, email us at podcast@xtalks.com.